Hey guys, welcome back to Project Bodybuilding, and welcome to my first episode of the Road to the 2025 Arnold Classic series. If you don't know, before major shows, I do a series of videos for a proper build-up into these given contests. And I'm very excited for this year's Arnold, and I have prepared 18 videos in this series of all different types of matchups, and maybe a few bonus videos. But anyway, I have 18 videos to get into, so let's not waste any more time and jump into the first one. I wanted to kick this series off with one of three main comparisons. As I see it currently, this Arnold Classic is largely a three-man race between three top 5 Olympians. We have Derek Lunsford, a former Mr. Olympia, Samson Dauda, the current Mr. Olympia, and Andrew Jack, who could quite possibly be Mr. Olympia very soon. Out of those three today, I picked the Nigerian Lion and the Mona Lisa of bodybuilding for today's comparison. But of course, that's not too exciting for a first episode. They just competed a couple of months ago at the 2024 Mr. Olympia, and we know that Andrew Jack was 5th while Samson was 1st. However, what we don't know is what would have happened had Andrew replicated his insane 2024 Texas Pro version, which is widely considered to be his best. I feel that I have to do this comparison if I want to make some good predictions at the end of the series. It's not just for the entertainment factor, but legitimately, what happens when these two amazing bodybuilders that are extremely similar compete at their best to date? Let's jump into today's video to find out. Here is episode 1 of my Road to the Arnold Classic series, 2024 Texas Pro Andrew versus 2024 Samson Dauda. Remember, if you guys like these types of videos and want to see more, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to stay up to date on this series. In terms of having mass with class, these two are probably the best in the front double biceps at this point in time. Samson is at least up there, but I think one thing is pretty sure, Andrew is still far ahead of even him. Right here, he's honestly making Samson look a little bit small, which is insane. Andrew starts off with winning the quads for one. Yes, he doesn't have a good level of condition all the way around his physique, and we'll talk about that, but from the front, he does not have an issue. In fact, the reason he wins a lot of these areas is because of details, like the quads. Samson and Andrew are both massive, but Andrew is more separated. What's really interesting though, and perhaps a bit blasphemous, is who I have winning the waistline, because it's not Andrew actually. With his vacuum, Samson's waist is actually smaller, and with that, I do prefer his torso shape to Andrew's. Andrew, of course, is more than fine. I wish his obliques were smaller, but absolutely no one is complaining about his shape. And he does win the lats, which of course are part of the torso. He wins them pretty easily too. And as a matter of fact, he wins the namesake of the pose, the arms. He makes Samson look small and flat outside of Andrew's own skinny forearms. But through the bis and tris, Andrew has double the peak and double the hang respectively. So overall, Andrew wins everything here. It's why he's the best in this shot currently. Sure, he doesn't have the smaller waist, but again, his shape is immaculate. He's bigger and he's more detailed, and he's winning all these areas individually. What's important to note here for any comparison with Andrew is the margin of victory for some of these poses, because this will matter later on. Luckily, in my comparisons, I use a margin of victory point system where the winner of the pose gets 1, 2, or 3 points, depending on if their win is narrow, solid, or dominant. Usually against all but the very top guys, Andrew's getting 3-pointers in his 3 key shots, including this shot. I think this is still pretty solid against Samson, however, that does not mean Andrew gets a perfect score here. Samson has an incredibly aesthetic pose. There isn't too much wrong with it. Andrew's just quite the evolution though. I am going to let Samson hold Andrew back from a full 3-point margin here, but just slightly. Andrew still starts out strong with 2 points. The front lat spread does get better for Samson, but this is one of those 3 Andrew poses that he wins pretty much every single time against everybody. The arms are out of the equation as the main focus and play more of an assisting role here, as the lats are now the main focus here aside from overall shape. And the lats are definitely closer than the arms were. Andrew is a bit thicker, but not much wider at all. I think he could actually expand on his margin here if he was posing a bit more opened up, but this is still enough to claim the lats against Samson, but very narrowly. I would give Samson a small edge in the rest of the upper body stuff though. He looks slightly thicker up top overall. Andrew, though, once again has the overall quality advantage. So he has the same details as Samson in the chest, but beats him through the abs. And it's the same in the lower body as it was in the last pose because of that quality advantage. It's closer here too, though. Samson looks a bit sharper and larger here for whatever reason. I'm still going with Andrew, though, for those superior cuts. Overall, it is closer than the front double, but Andrew still does win a lot of areas, but by smaller margins this time around. The upper body was particularly close because Samson was very close to him in the lats and the rest of the other muscle groups. And of course, Samson is big, wide, and carries a lot of size with great shape, which helps him tremendously against closing the gap. And I do think he's one of the best to close said gap in this pose. Andrew still wins, but I only see it as a 1-point win. It's a much stronger pose for Samson, but Andrew is still probably the best in the world in this shot. We're moving away from the front shots now, and this is where the cracks tend to start forming for Andrew. The side chest is one of Andrew's worst poses, and it's probably Samson's best. For starters, Andrew's posing is incredibly awkward, but he loses all the main areas too, but by small margins. Andrew loses the side leg. It's not even really a size thing, although he needs more in the hamstring, he's just not as sharp as Samson from this angle. Even in the midsection, Andrew needs more detail, and this area should be a slam dunk for him always. But with his awkward, unpracticed posing, he's pushing the stomach out and leaving the abs untensed. Samson is winning here because at least he's keeping his core tight. Then in the upper limb, I'd go with Samson. I've given this to Andrew in the past, but Samson is thick enough now to surpass Andrew's 3D fullness. And finally in the chest, this is actually Andrew's best area. He has some good fullness and detail here, more detail than Samson, but Samson is just too overwhelming with that big rib cage and extremely thick pecs. Not to mention, Andrew looks lanky next to Samson, both because Andrew is less muscular, but that posing makes it worse as well. Andrew has okay elements honestly, but they're just not at all being pulled together enough to get close to Samson. So Samson gets his first win with 2 points. I say this every time we take a look at Andrew's rear double, and I'm going to say it again. He could easily have one of the best rear doubles in the world if he just makes a few minor tweaks. The major one is conditioning. His entire backside needs to be as peeled and as popping as the front. And if he just worked on the back as he is now, because it is growing, and the hamstrings, he's there. Already at the Olympia, his back got better, but he still needs that conditioning. And with this version, while it's close, it's still too obvious for me not to go with a larger win for Samson. Samson wins everything, but with small margins yet again. The lower body goes to him because of conditioning, but really there's not that much of a difference here at all. Both guys need to step up their game. And Andrew is actually bigger down here in the glutes, hams, even the quad sweeps. This is what I'm talking about. With just a little extra polish, this is something he could easily turn around. And up top, it's the same ordeal. Andrew's back is too smooth and flat. Samson is more 3D and has more overall depth. Andrew's back is too smooth and flat. So even though none of these areas go to Samson by a lot, he's winning both the lower and upper halves of the pose. 1 + 1 typically equals 2, so this will make another 2-pointer for Samson. But let me say this, if Andrew does even the bare minimum, this quickly becomes just a 1-pointer, then a tie, and potentially could go to Andrew just outright. The rear lat spread is a much more even playing field. Typically, wide structures equal wide backs, and in this case, they are some of the widest guys out there currently. Andrew looks to be slightly wider than Samson, but I really wish he'd change his posing on this. I think he could appear thicker in the mid-back and still keep that width with a few tweaks. The lighting does hurt him a little here though. If you look closely, you'll see that he has some good meat aligning the spinal column from traps to erectors. But you know what would also help him show that off? Better conditioning. Samson's back is a little tighter and drier, and he has good thickness in the lats and traps. But then in the lower body, I don't know, Samson just looks a little small here, and the conditioning edge really isn't enough. So all in all, Andrew probably wins the lower half because he's bigger. And he's probably winning the whole pose, at least slightly, because he's wider in the back as well. It isn't as much about detail now, so I don't think Samson's small edge and conditioning really helps him out a whole lot here. I can go either way, but I'm going with Andrew for the time being. It's hard to argue with that width when Samson doesn't bring anything outstanding to counteract that. So Andrew will be receiving 1 point here. We have another side pose now and another swing and a miss for Andrew Jacked. This is honestly an even more awkward pose than the side chest when Andrew can't include his front tricep variation. He's visually struggling to hit that pose, and you can see the discomfort in his face. He loses the side leg again, he's smaller in the pecs, and he loses the tricep. What's really surprising though is Samson is actually winning the midsection here. Andrew is simply not making an effort to fully lock in, so Samson by default has the more defined abs. With that said, once again, Andrew does have okay elements in this pose, but he's just not putting the pieces in the right places. He loses the body parts, overall size, overall condition, and the posing aspect. So Samson is taking another 2-point win in this side shot as well. Andrew can shake that one off though, because now we have the abs and thighs, his signature shot. He's beating everyone today, except maybe Hottie Chupin, and that's hotly debated. Here against Samson, he definitely wins the quads. Samson smooth out a lot here, and he looks very unimpressive. Andrew has the size, and to reiterate, his condition from the front is actually better than Samson's. So he's bigger and more conditioned in the thighs portion of the pose. Then in the abs, Samson kind of has that bubbly quality to his abs like Andrew, but Andrew's obviously on another level when it comes to those popping, deeply separated abs. Not just that, but Andrew's waist is much smaller and his taper is better. I think maybe Samson's abs are good enough to make this just a 2-point win because that's at least something, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to give Andrew the full 3 points here, and I don't think I'll get any pushback with how beloved Andrew is in this shot. That brings us to our final pose, the most muscular. Once again, a lot of Andrew's tools are being squandered here because of subpar posing. He's tall, wide, and really for this pose he has an okay level of size. He isn't as muscular or as thick as Samson pound for pound, but he gets carried a lot by his structure. In fact, Andrew wins the legs again. It's a bit more narrow in this shot, but it's what you've probably come to expect at this point. He's just as big as Samson and more detailed. However, this is where Andrew stops winning. Even the midsection, a place that shouldn't be a contest, ends up going to Samson because Andrew's only passively tensing his abs, not really flexing them. He's not winning the arms either with flailing them out like that. He looks very lanky. And he does have good chest detail, but Samson is very thick here, claiming the area. I do think Andrew's overall size and structure pulls a ton of weight here. The detail helps too, but Samson snags wins in most of these areas and is the more muscular individual. So he will end this comparison with a 1-point win. Next, we have the second round of judging. Here, we're using the same scoring system, but looking at the whole physiques on the following 4 metrics: shape, conditioning, muscularity, and flaws. Let's go ahead and start with shape. Legitimately, I did prefer Samson's shape in a couple of instances. This entire category is obviously the most subjective one, but objectively, it's close. These are pretty much the only 2 physiques in the league today that are even close to each other. No one else looks like this. Andrew is still probably a little more shapely overall. I'm not giving him anything more than 1 point though, because again, it's very close. Next, we have condition. Samson did have the sharper glutes, hams, lower back, those telltale signs of conditioning, but those areas didn't go to Samson by much, and Andrew was more detailed from the front. These guys really aren't that far apart, which I was surprised with. Still, I think Samson's front was better condition-wise than Andrew's side and back were. So I think Samson has the stronger overall average, but very narrowly. That brings us to muscularity, another category I didn't expect to be so close, but Andrew is quickly gaining ground. Show to show, he's been improving a lot, just as Samson is. I would say Samson has the tiny edge in pound for pound muscularity, as he looks less lanky in more poses, and he is more complete. But this could dissipate in literally the next offseason for Andrew. For now, I'm giving this to Samson with yet another 1-point win. And finally, we have flaws. And both guys do have some issues. Samson has some small gyno and tends to let that stomach hang out at times. Andrew's main flaw is posing. I know it seems contrived, but it is a flaw that I count in this section, and it definitely hurt him in more shots than anything Samson had wrong. Andrew was actively losing points and poses because of his poor posing. So unfortunately, I have to dock him. Not majorly, surprise, surprise, this will just be another 1-point win for Samson. Going into this comparison, I actually picked it as the first episode because I thought this wouldn't be the main matchup. Everyone is talking about Derek versus Samson, which makes sense, they're both Olympia champions. However, after doing this comparison, I'm not so sure Derek v Samson will be the main event. I believe Andrew can push Samson in different ways, and maybe even push him harder than Derek can. However, as of today, with these being their best versions at this given point, I still have Samson coming out on top. He won today's comparison with 58.3 points to Andrew's 41.7. This is really not a large gap. This comparison didn't have many points to go around. They tied in the mandatories. It was very close. So adjusted for inflation, that 17-point lead for Samson is paper thin. Especially when you consider that both of these guys improve rapidly and make big improvements when they do have time away from the stage, which can change things very quickly, of course. The reason this is so close is because of Andrew's unique genetic gifts, something Derek can't really replicate. In fact, Derek is going to be the odd man out if this goes to a 3-man call-out. Andrew is one of the only ones in the world that can withstand Samson's overall size and structure. Andrew's actually a bit better in terms of the structure. That alone helps tremendously. He will not be getting bullied and overwhelmed by Samson. With this in mind, I am coming to the realization that maybe Andrew is the only one that can defeat Samson when Samson is on. Derek can at least force the judges to make a coin flip decision because it's apples and oranges. That can benefit Derek and maybe show the judges that his set of strengths is better, but Andrew can actually go toe-to-toe with Samson on his own terms. Derek can't. And that's taking nothing away from Derek. He's still my predicted second at this point in time, even though I think Andrew may be the only one with the capacity to defeat an on Samson. Currently, Andrew still does need some tweaks. One of those is the back, but I want to point out that it was already better at the Olympia. If he can improve his conditioning just 5%, he'd win that category. He'd definitely win the rear lat spread pose by maybe 2 points, and then he'd force the rear double to at least be close. Then if he can improve his posing, that would cut Samson's advantage in the side poses in half. Even if he just did some of those things, it would easily shift the win to him on my scorecard. As of right now, however, I see Samson as a little bit more well-rounded. Sure, he doesn't have shots like Andrew's front double, front lat, or abs and thighs, but he's more even across the board. Andrew has those highs, but some lows as well. Samson kept the highs close, the front double and the front lat spread, and he won Andrew's low points. Andrew is still kind of just operating with 3 main poses at this point. Very quickly, this could turn around, and who knows, maybe it will on show day. Currently though, I believe Samson Dauda will defeat Andrew Jacked at the 2025 Arnold Classic. Well, that's going to do it for today's video. Do you think Andrew at his best can beat Samson at his best? Is Andrew the only one that can really do that at this point? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. And if you like this video, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss any episode of this series. And if you want to support me even further and are in need of some high quality supplements, be sure to head over to Arms Race Nutrition. Then at checkout, use my code Project10 for 10% off your entire order. That's code Project10 at armsracenutrition.com. And finally, with all that said, I want to thank you guys for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.
Gotta get that Lexia.